Welcome back, everyone, to Living Your Greatness. And I just want to start before I introduce my guests. I just want to start that I've created this series on building generational wealth because I'm truly concerned. I'm truly concerned about friends or family or anyone out there that is trying to learn better about finances or financial education so they can learn how to build and manage their wealth. And so really the whole purpose of this is to attract all types of people. I really feel sometimes the financial world can be very intimidating when really it doesn't need to be that way. So really, I'm looking to empower all people to be more financially literate. And I just want to transition from there and introduce Peter Krauth. Welcome back to the show.
Ben, I'm really happy to be here. It's always fun chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to our talk today.
Same here, same here. And super stoked to have even caught up, before even hopping on. And it was really fun even just to talk a little bit about, how we feel, both of us, that, being financially literate is so important. And not only in the world of finance, but the same way if we think about being, physically well, we have to be fiscally literate, right? So I just want to start off, Peter, like maybe before diving there, like what is your definition or maybe your perspective on what a wealthy mindset means to you? If we could start there.
Well, I guess a wealthy mindset means being comfortable in what you know and the decisions that you make because you've taken the time to become informed. And when you make those decisions that can be quite impactful, on your financial well-being, you're taking those decisions with a lot of comfort because you've put the time and the effort in. And I think that goes a long way. I've been in this space that I've been researching and working in for the last almost 20 years, or even more, frankly. But um, there are a lot of people who are, I'm going to call them detractors, and they're going to be critical, and they're going to say, you said this, you said that, and it hasn't happened, or it hasn't happened fast enough. But so it takes a lot of conviction, and the conviction comes. I mean, there's the conviction and thick skin, right? Because the conviction comes from the research and the effort and the time put in, and then the confidence, right? I think that if you've put in the time and the effort to understand, let's say, a financial outlook, for example, what will be the drivers for certain assets, let's say, going forward, and where should you be invested, then you can ride out. There's going to be volatility. You can ride that volatility out a lot more easily. Have patience when things don't quite go your way for a little while. That's going to be the case all the time and in every asset, because you have conviction and you've, as I say, you've put that time in. So, I mean, it does take patience, but I think the knowledge leads to the comfort to make these important decisions that where you will perhaps give yourself exposure to certain assets, which you probably should have for, I believe, many years still going forward. Because I certainly think that certain assets will outperform. And again, making those decisions is not easy. Making them with a lot of information that leads to comfort is the best and most productive way.
I hear you, Peter, and I think that talks a lot about, being competent, right? If we're competent in something that we're learning, whether it's finance or whether it's even, again, I'm going to go back to, even physical well-being. If we have the competency, then we'll probably have more competence in what we're trying to do or learn, right? And so I think that's really good that you referred to having like the knowledge. I think if we have more knowledge, we have more competency, we probably have a better probability of making a better decision. So I definitely echo that. And so I think your example was hyper focused in terms of our financial wealth. And I want to even add like something that I've been saying in other conversations is when I think of a wealthy mindset, it's beyond just even like the financial wealth domain. Um, every area of, wealth, whether it's our fiscal wealth or whether it's our social wealth, all these areas, like the more we know, the more we can make better decisions, right? So I love that you went there right away. I kind of want to continue by asking you my next question more. Okay, if someone is now trying to already say, hey, I just want to learn in general about the finance world. And again, sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, it can be really intimidating. Maybe they've never been shown it by maybe their father or their mother, or maybe they've had bad experiences with money where they've had a lot of debt that they're trying to pay off. So what if someone was currently right now, they have debt or they have big expenses, but at the same time, they actually want to start learning. Like, how would you advise someone to already take the steps from there?
So, well, do what you can to reduce your debt. Try to spend less than you earn. That's the first way. Maybe there's ways sometimes you can consolidate your debt. I'm not an expert in that, but that would be a thing to look at. I know that that exists and that can help sort of reorganize things, so to speak. But I've been told, or I've read a few times that the Swiss tend to be amongst the wealthiest as on average as investors because they have a different mindset, and their mindset is that they need to invest first. In other words, from the top line, one of the first places that they commit money is to investments. Now, I'm not going to, go into which investments that, they pick because I'm sure it's all over the place. Different types of investment assets, whether it's real estate or stocks or bonds or precious metals, it's probably all over, like for everyone. But it's the mindset. It's the fact that they put that as an absolute top priority. Their willingness to spend on other things comes after that. And it's because they treat that as such an important priority that they accumulate more and they have more. And so that is a tremendous way to approach it. Um, what I would say too is that, so that's one thing is kind of, pay yourself first and pay yourself first in terms of putting money aside in different kinds of investments. If you don't feel comfortable enough yet with what those investments should be, that's okay. Put it in cash. Now, there's issues with cash because of inflation and it will lose buying power. But, if you're talking about giving yourself a matter of a few months or 6 months or even 12 months, it's not going to be the end of the world. Just, accumulate some cash, have that cash available so that once you've taken some time to do research and decide how you want to allocate the cash that you're accumulating into investments, you feel comfortable, which is what we talked about at the beginning. In other words, you feel comfortable with the decisions that you're making. One other thing I can suggest too is that people should not feel, I say this often, they should not feel like it's an all or nothing kind of thing. Whatever investment you choose, to whatever degree, whatever portion it represents of your portfolio, you shouldn't feel like you have to be all in from, the moment you've got this cash available. Um, I'm a big proponent of saying buy into any given investment in what I call in tranches and do it gradually. It's here's one example, and I know because it's the case with me. I'm assuming it's the case with others. Others have told me, in fact, that they feel the same way. And that is and let's just use a stock as an example. I'm not even going to give a specific name, but just a given stock. You like whatever company, XYZ. You really like them, but you know almost nothing about them. I honestly, in fact, so I'm gonna contradict myself here for a second. And what I will say is if let's say you have $1,000 to invest, put even if it's as little as $100. If it's not too meaningful to your financial well-being, but you're really anxious, you really love company XYZ, it's not going to change your standard of living, put the $100 in, and I guarantee you will start following that company like a hawk. You will start paying attention to what's happening, how the stock is moving, what the news is with that company. And again, I'm not suggesting to go out and invest your whole portfolio that way, but it is a way for you to create a relationship with an investment and feel committed to it. And if you do that, and then you like, again, I admit I'm contradicting myself, going a little bit backwards, but if you do that, and then you start to take a little bit of time and do the proper research, decide why you like the investment, why you like the company, what the outlook is for it, and so on. At that point, and if you feel like I really feel like I'm comfortable, I should commit more of my cash to that investment, then you can continue gradually adding to your initial tranche, so to speak. And if you decide, well, my final or total overall commitment to that investment is going to be a maximum of, say, $500 or $1,000, well, you can buy the rest of the amount that you have available over two, three, maybe four different purchases to gradually accumulate your full position. And so these are ways that you can approach investing and minimize some risk.
I appreciate that answer, Peter. I think the first part was really, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of like just like spend below your means and learn how to start saving, to get rid of that debt, right? So you got to take care of that first, 100%. But then I like the fact that you got to, okay, once you start now learning, you have to at some point try, right? Just like any skill set. Like if we start learning about how to run, we don't need to run a marathon tomorrow, but we got to at least start maybe even 2K, just a
Yeah,
little, right?
that's right.
And then maybe learn a little bit more and, build up, in other areas of fitness components to then maybe go to 4, right? And gradually build up. But that's because we're learning more of what we're doing, right? And so I really like the fact that you touched upon the most important thing, which is get rid of your debt. Take care of that, and also teach yourself lifestyle habits to reduce your costs because we could easily get in debt again if we've already been in. We want to change that pattern. So I think that was really good. And the next kind of maybe direction I want to go, I think is really valid or important here is just getting a better understanding of, the terminology of financial literacy. I find we've been hearing this term a lot, maybe in the last decade, but I think the everyday person could still get a better understanding of what that means. So I'm curious to get your perspective. There's no right or wrong, but your perspective of what financial literacy means to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think that it's very important. I'm honestly disappointed that financial literacy is not taught more in schools at every level. You can start at the earliest possible level, kindergarten, grade one, things about saving, um, about how you use money. There's really a lot of, and I'm by far not an expert in that sort of aspect of it, but it's a shame. I really think that it's one of the great sort of um, uh, shortfalls that we have towards our younger generations, and that's been the case for as long as I can remember. So unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, you have to self-educate when it comes to that. There are all kinds of great courses that you can attend or even watch. I don't have anything specific to recommend, but what I would start with in terms of a basic uh, approach to becoming financially literate is start by understanding budgeting. That's one of the things that we talked about just a few moments ago. After that, I think it'd be important for people to get a very, very broad perspective on investing and what different kinds of assets there are out there, how they work. And I'm talking about, you don't have to go into the deep weeds of everything, but let's say understand, for example, the major asset classes are things like stocks, bonds, cash, real estate, precious metals, commodities. I mean, it goes well beyond that, but those are, let's say, very quickly, sort of five major types of asset classes. Take some time. Go into each of these a little bit, understand what they are, how they work. You don't have to overwhelm yourself, but knowing what your broadest categories, options are for investing, and then eventually you can decide based on your comfort level and your outlook for each of these different categories, how you should allocate to them individually. If you feel that, you're a lower risk investor, you may want to keep a higher portion of your investments in some of the safer things like cash and precious metals. You may decide that you want a lower portion in things like stocks or bonds, depending again on your outlook and your comfort level with them. But I would say start with identifying what the broadest investment categories are and different asset types, and get to know them a little bit better, and then get to understand and decide what your comfort level is with them and what you feel the outlook is in your view towards each of these different asset classes, and decide how to allocate towards them.
I think that's a good answer. And I think even just to add, I have a friend, I remember it was like 2 years ago, and he was literally asking, like, man, I just want to learn more about what I don't know, which is financial well-being and, how to be more financially literate. And right away, he did his research. He's like, hey, there's this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, some of the most copies, in the world. His name is Robert Kiyosaki, someone who I know you've been on a panel with, Peter, which is cool to celebrate, someone that I've met as well. But he read the book, and it really, first off, brought mindset. So what does it mean, the difference between a poor and a rich mind? And then obviously it was a good introduction, to learning more about real assets, right? And so I think that's one book that I could think of many other that I think people need to read, to educate themselves. And that kind of makes me want to ask you, you have a daughter and a son, right? So you're a father. You
Right.
also have a wife, right? So a partner. And so I'm curious, like sometimes it can be really intimidating, to younger generations. Sometimes it doesn't even matter what generation, older generations too, because they never took
Sure.
the time to learn. Or even depending on our sex, right? If we're female or male. So I'm curious, like if someone was, intimidated, where would you point them as like a starting block, to educate themselves?
I think your suggestion is probably one of the very best ones. I haven't read them myself, but I've been told that there are books, for example, that are aimed at women in terms of, it takes a different perspective, aimed at women in terms of what is important to them, in terms of investing, how to approach things, how they understand and see things. So that could be a way to for women, for example, to look for books that are targeted at women and investing and how they can be self-sufficient financially and so on. Get to know all of that space well. There is one, and I'm going to say biased towards a certain area because it's the area of my interest and work, which is precious metals. One of the things that I would recommend probably very strongly to people is this video series that was created and put out by a guy by the name Mike Maloney. And he has a series called The Hidden Secrets of Money. And it has been a tremendous success, very broad reach and appeal. And a lot of people actually that I know who've come to understand and become more comfortable with the whole precious metal space, so let's say specifically gold and silver, have said that it was their gateway, so to speak. It was their entry into this sector because it really struck a chord with them. They really understood the role and the importance of gold and silver historically, currently, and in the future. And he did a fantastic job in that series of boiling things down for people and explaining why these are really true money, have been for millennia and will continue to be. So these are a few ideas in terms of where people could start.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you mentioned, that aspect or that spot for education, just because, that is one area of like a real tangible asset, and to get a better education of what is money and what does money mean to us, or how does it play in a part in our world. So how do we better understand it? Because if we better understand it, then we'll be able to learn how to better position ourselves. So I'm glad that you did that. There's nothing wrong with picking a specific area of wealth. And something that I want to, ask you is, I'm curious to like, what is something that you see often, when people are asking you questions, like from what I've noticed is sometimes people get very impatient, they don't have the emotional intelligence, maybe um, let's not go too specific in terms of investing, but just taking the time to educate and understand. And so what is like, common questions when you see people are reaching out to you or curious, like obviously they're trying to improve, in terms of their financial well-being, but what are some common things that you've noticed?
Well, what I will say is that one of the things that, and I think you pointed it out, is impatience. They think, oh, I've read about this stock. I should just, I'm being told that it's good and it's just going to go up. I should just jump into it right away. I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait. And that's probably one of the biggest ones. And that's where I caution people that if and that kind of relates a little bit to my answer from before when I kind of contradicted myself a little bit. It's a bit of a happy medium. If I do overwhelmingly suggest that you take your time and you do your research and you get comfortable with a given investment or investment area, but you can cheat a little bit the way I was suggesting. If there's a company that you're really excited about and you feel, I don't want to wait, buy a little bit of it. Don't buy necessarily the whole amount that you have in mind to allocate to it. So you've given yourself that entry, and then if you go and you take the time after that and you do the deeper research and you feel that yes, this has the potential that I agree with, that I've read about, and I feel comfortable with it. I do want to allocate more to it. You can, as I say, do these increments of investing into that company, and that sometimes, if the price, let's say you bought at $10, for example, a certain stock, and you've noticed that it started to come down a little bit. It's important to be careful, not to buy something that is necessarily where the outlook has turned negative, right? You don't want to keep buying something where you feel maybe there's been some kind of a big wrench thrown into this thing, into these gears, and it really doesn't look that great going forward. Some big problem has developed. If the price has started to come down, but your outlook is just as good. I mean, this is something that Warren Buffett would say, be ready to buy a stock or an investment that you're going to want to buy more of if it gets cheaper. You should be happy that it's getting cheaper because you get to buy more of it for less money, right? You get more shares for less money if it's gotten cheaper, but your outlook on it hasn't changed. If it stayed the same or even gotten more favorable. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things is people are impatient. They unfortunately don't necessarily take the time or want to take the time to do the research necessary. And this is one way where, like I say, you can maybe cheat a little bit, make a small allocation, and then take some time to start researching it more. And then perhaps if your outlook stays the same, keep adding to it afterwards. And you may get to add to it potentially at an even lower price. It may work out in your favor and you will kind of average down, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's some good advice. And I would also like to add, to your point of there is a difference of investing and speculating, in any type of company, right? It doesn't matter. So I like your aspect of doing your research on like the long-term view.
Right.
Because if we've done our research, we're probably more likely to be competent to then have the confidence to be patient, right? And have the emotional intelligence that kind of like you said, whether there's highs or lows, wanting to buy more when we see, well, the fundamentals here are just so strong for X, Y, Z reasons that how could I not? Another thing that I want to go to is, I have heard this a lot, and I'm not saying I really know which direction to go here, but I have met, and this isn't always the case, but some people that are very spiritually connected to themselves in the financial world, where they really know thyself, they really know how to do great good for themselves and others. They really give back without any expectations to receive. They really care about educating. They're more of like a fiduciary, right? Rather
Mhm.
than maybe a salesman. how do you see, when you think about people that you've met in the space that truly know thyself and truly are some of the most spiritual people that maybe you've met in this world? Sometimes I feel like people like won't even explore the finance world because they think there's all hatred and bad
Oh,
and all that
yeah,
stuff, which I think is it's such a I don't know. It's such a critical judgment without actually
sure.
getting to know the people in the space. And then like on like the other end, the second part of the question is like, how do we know the difference between, a fiduciary and a salesman? Whether that's when we're trusting someone with our money or whether that is, investing in our education or going to a conference ourselves.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you say that. You're right. I haven't gotten that question before. That's a good point. And yeah, I mean, there's a few names that kind of come to mind. And so when I think about these people, and it's not necessarily the case, and it's not the case for all of them, but they do tend to be a little bit older. They do tend to be very successful. And I think that if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that they're the best fiduciaries because they've had their success. They don't need to sell anything anymore, right? And that is very helpful because the pressure's off, right? They feel like they want to give back. And that's why they do it. And you do have a lot of people like that, even in finance and investing. Don't discount that whole idea and that whole thought. It exists. It absolutely does. And I can say I'm happy to say that I've met and I know several of these people and I see them coming back over and over and over. And Ben, you've interviewed many of them many times over, and they just feel that they want to give back. And you ask them, how come you do so many interviews? How come? And they say, I've had my success. That's the thrill that I get now is to share the knowledge that I've built up over time that has helped me be successful. That's how I get my thrill now is to go out there and to share that with others, and it just makes me feel good. So those people are out there, and I can tell you that some of them are not just multimillionaires but multi-billionaires, and they find the time. They do it. They absolutely do it. And if you look, you can look at what they've done. Some of them are very generous when it comes to charities, that kind of thing, have written books about their successes and how they and it's not, I don't think it's from their perspective, it's a point of bragging. I think that they just like to share what they've accomplished and what they continue to do and how they are able and willing to help others. And some have written books about how, they've accumulated wealth and then they start to share it by giving it to charities and all sorts of different causes. So, I mean, I hope that's helpful. I hope I've answered the question. But again, yes, those people are out there. And I think that if you look at the angle that they're coming from and look at their background and their history and how successful they've been, that'll help you distinguish whether they really are fiduciaries or salesmen.
I really appreciate that answer, Peter, and I mean this from my heart. Like I feel like that's a really good answer. And like even the way I know I do this a lot with sports, I can't help because it's played such a big role in my life. But it's almost like judging that, like, okay, every Olympian because they got to that level, they must always be competitive. It's like when I was at a very high level, I think I showcased that myself, but even I met some people that were incredibly humble, incredibly connected to themselves, to the connection of movement and play and enjoyment and all the other reasons why we even should be curious about moving our body or doing one out of thousands of ways that we can move our body, being dedicated, to
Right.
the sport. So I'm glad that you mentioned that because I do find it's very human nature that when people haven't tried something or been somewhere, they sometimes lead out of fear. And with
Right.
fear, they judge or they criticize
Right.
rather than going from a place of heart of, okay, how about I go experience this community? And just like any community, there's going to be all characters. There's going to be good, bad, and ugly. And how do I, with time, be open to knowing that, okay, there are some really, really good humans out there, to reshape their mindset of, assuming that all people in the finance world do it for greed or
Right.
taking advantage to, be better in competition to outsmart someone else to get money, right? Which you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot from the
Mhm.
everyday person. And I kind of want to debunk that. And I think it also goes with what I was saying at the start of this interview is like, I really want to make sure I can hold a space, that feels from the start more inclusive for people and, connect the great, generous minds that I've had, to them. And, one of the next questions I just want to ask and kind of final questions is, you've learned a lot about yourself over, the years of investing and even beyond investing, even life, right? And so I'm curious, like, when you think of building generational wealth, you've obviously been doing that for yourself as well as your family, you're a father. And so I'm curious to ask you, like, um, what would be like one lesson that you've learned, at least, in terms of building generational wealth? And like, is there anything that you've ever shared, with either your partner or even like your like your children, because obviously there's a legacy that
Right.
continues afterwards. So I'm just curious. That's kind of like my final question that I'm curious to ask you about.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, great question. I think that there's a few things there. Probably one of the most important ones is keep an open mind. Things can change, and some of the absolute most successful investors are the ones that can change their decisions or change their point of view when they feel that the facts have changed enough. One of the best ones is one of the guys that probably I was referring to earlier is Rick Rule. And one time a few years back, I had interviewed him, and one of my questions to him was, how do you feel about always going back and checking your premises? Meaning, going back and checking if your point of view or your reason for making a certain investment is the same or has changed. And he said, I love that question because that's what I do every day. And, every day that you own a stock, and you haven't sold it, it's like you've bought it. So did I buy it today because I still think it's my outlook on it is positive. And one of the other things that I would say is, it's funny, somebody asked me this at a conference just recently, is um, how do you, how do you, um, what's your outlook in terms of how people are best connected to themselves, or those are the wisest and maybe the most amongst the most successful? And I said my answer to him was, it's the ones who never feel like they have the final answer. There's never a final answer. Never, if you never feel like you have all the information. I'm not saying that at some point you have to, based on what you have and what you know, you have to make decisions, because otherwise you're frozen and you do nothing, right? But keep your mind open, because the facts can change. But anyone, like I feel that the wisest people are the ones who um, never have sort of a final set mindset about anything in particular, investments as much as anything, because they're always willing to consider new sources of input. Things change all the time, and they change faster than they ever do. So I'm going to say one last thing that I've sort of shared with family and so on is be patient. I think that, and I've said this many times, I've said it in conferences, and I've said patience is the rarest commodity. And I think that that's probably true more today than ever. But um, you can look back at the last, say, 20 years, and patience, and I'm going to do a little selling here, and that is, at least broadly, precious metals. Um, Patience in precious metals over the last, say, 20, 25 years has been extremely well rewarded. If you look at where gold and silver were back in, say, 2000, 2001, and where they are today, and you compare that with stocks, with bonds, they have been tremendous performers. And if memory serves me right, they've been tremendous outperformers of broader markets and certainly of bonds. And so, yes, they've brought a lot of volatility, but they've been fantastic. Now, if you had told someone, just about anyone, frankly, back 20, 25 years ago, you need to get invested in precious metals, most people would have just sort of laughed at you. This was the height of the internet bubble, early 2000, 2001, and that was all the rage. This was about as unattractive and uninteresting as you could have possibly talked about any kind of an investment. And if you look now 20, 25 years out, it was absolutely one of the best places to be. So that's why I say be patient, do your research, be comfortable, never have sort of a final set mind about where things are and where they need to be and where they absolutely will go, because things will change along the way. Those I feel again are the sort of the wisest people, and probably amongst the most successful.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Peter. I've had some other guests on for the series, and a lot of them, like the common ground has been patience. Just, things compound over time and results don't always appear every way. And I'm gonna, use again another like physical well-being, example, but it's like you see that even like when you're training really hard, towards, a fitness goal. Not just the improvement or the enjoyment or the mind-body connection, but like most importantly, like the results will always come, assuming that you're putting in the work, you're being consistent, you're doing everything that it means to be physically well. So not just training and moving your body, but also eating well, sleeping well. Those are other aspects that are related to, the outcome, right? The outcome of looking better and feeling better, right? So no, I agree with you. It's the same thing in finance. It's you're not going to see it overnight, but you will see if you stay true to, doing your homework and putting in the actions, you will see results with time, So I'm glad that you mentioned patience. And just want to take like the last moment, Peter. I kind of share with you, off air, I have a speaking series in Montreal. You're from Montreal, I'm from Montreal. If you can make it, would love to see you there, or even any of your family. But anything else that you want to kind of add before we close this conversation?
Yeah, actually, yes. One of the things that came to mind before when you were talking about how, some of the most successful athletes, how they live, how they act, and how they live. And the one sort of thought that came to mind was being able to compartmentalize these different aspects of their lives. And if they are able, even if sometimes it's for a short amount of time, to almost basically completely detach from other aspects, whether it's work, school, um, training, all of that, upcoming competitions. If you're able to compartmentalize and you're with your significant other for the next, few hours or day, you really put yourself 100% into, that given time and environment that you have. And I think that makes for a healthier person. Um, Certainly, I think psychologically they can be healthier. They've detached from perhaps what others would see as ongoing pressure from training and trying to reach goals and performance and so on. And they can come back to that when the other downtime, so to speak, has passed, and they have to go back to the training and the preparation. I think they go back to that fresher, and they can be more creative, they can be more productive. And I think that applies probably in all sorts of aspects of life. But I think if I'm not saying it's easy to do, it's not. Sometimes we're under all kinds of pressure, serious pressure in our lives for different reasons. It becomes difficult to detach. And as I say, it's not always easy, but I think that those who can achieve that in their lives and be, again, separate the different, albeit all important aspects of their lives, if they can compartmentalize them, I think they have a better chance of being at their best in each and every one of them. So that's probably something that, I sort of would like to throw out there and have people consider in terms of their approach to life.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those final words, Peter. And I also want to say too, I want to add one last couple of details here, Ashley, before we close off the conversation. But it's been a real honor to have known you in the last 5 years, seeing your journey of, you could be doing the actions for yourself, which, when I met you, you were already doing that and already be educating, with an audience. But then obviously after knowing you for quite some time, and developing a relationship, seeing you also grow in terms of sharing your voice, like your voice matters, and seeing you, speak on more platforms or more stages, and not out of ego, out of like truly wanting to educate and help, So I wanted to acknowledge that then. I think more people need to know about your work. So I want to plug that in at the end. And also just maybe say to people, social wealth, right? Like I've learned
Absolutely.
a lot from you, you've learned a lot from me, we've learned a lot from even our circle or even beyond. And so to remind people how important it is to find the right people, I really believe there's a famous line from Tim Ferriss. To people that know me, all my friends, they know I've been reading his book since grade 11, but you are the average of, the top five people you spend with. So really, really important that in any area of holistic well-being that you're looking to grow or become more wealthy and strong in, to really make sure that you don't do it alone. Even if you have that lone wolf mentality, it's okay to be intrinsically motivated. It's okay to have that passion to learn on your own. But I really think we thrive more as a collective. So I just want to say again, I've really appreciated you being part of my financial network of people. I really appreciate you and the way that you choose to give and show up.
Thanks very, very much, Ben. And I want to, by the same token, I want to give a lot of credit to you because I think what you're doing is tremendous. Uh, being able to bring, we talked about financial literacy and trying to bring that to people, breaking it down into more accessible, more understandable approaches. And that's fantastic. That's so valuable because it sounds silly, but you have to start at the beginning. That's the beginning, right? Just getting to know things, not being afraid to ask questions, trying not to be intimidated, not being afraid of asking questions that you think others may think you need to know already the answers to. Just be inquisitive. Don't be afraid to ask questions. What's the worst? People who maybe laugh at that are frankly silly and closed-minded because everyone had to start somewhere, and you're doing yourself a disfavor if you're not asking lots of questions and as I say, starting at the beginning, be honest with yourself about how much you may or may not know about a certain topic. And the whole thing of being patient, but you're doing a tremendous job, and I think you're doing a fantastic, bringing a fantastic service to the investment community at large. So congrats to you, Ben. Thank you for that.
I appreciate the kind words, Peter. It means a lot. Great catching up with you today.
As always, thank you, Ben.